As a trustee of a small DC scheme, I believe that sustainable governance has never been so important in protecting members' pension pots. It includes three core areas: cost transparency, ESG risks, and climate risks. I actually view cost transparency in the same way as ESG and climate governance, because effectively understanding and managing costs also has a key impact in protecting members' pension pots. Guy Opperman recently commented that social factors must be at the heart of pension schemes' ESG strategy. With so much noise around environment and climate change, as trustees, I agree we must not lose sight of the social and governance risks. And actually, for me as a trustee, managing costs is a key part of my social and governance responsibilities. We'll be placing a lot of emphasis in this webinar on ESG and climate change, as there's potential significant impact to pension scheme investments, which need to be considered as carefully as both risks and potential opportunity. So what we want to do today is actually begin with the subject of cost transparency, which is becoming more established as a core part of the governance process for pension schemes. But before I hand over to Scott, Mel Duffield, the chair of the CTI group, has been kind enough to provide some insight into the recent progress of the CTI, which is, of course, an important part of sustainable governance. So over to you, Mel.
Welcome to this webinar today. I'm delighted that under the sustainable governance umbrella, we're going to be shining the spotlight on cost transparency. I've been the chair of the CTI board since it was first established in late 2018. And as a board, we're obviously really keen to understand now how well the CTI templates and framework are embedding in the industry. And we know that many schemes will now be entering their second full cycle of using the templates. We published a research report that reported increasing levels of take-up from schemes. So 8 out of 10 schemes that were surveyed said they were using the framework. And we also got really positive feedback around the ease of accessibility and ease of understanding of working with the framework. We know schemes are going to be moving from those first phases where the emphasis is very much on data collection and data quality assurance towards delivering tangible benefits, but that this doesn't happen overnight. It requires schemes to have confidence in the benchmarking information they're receiving and also signposting towards the potential actions that they can consider through their governance channels on the back of analysing that data. I've been really encouraged talking to my colleagues in USS and USIM in recent weeks about their experience of using the CTI templates second time round. They've told me that they're seeing much quicker response times from managers and also that the data quality that's coming back is much improved compared to the first cycle last year. And hopefully that's being replicated right across the industry. The feedback from our research did point to some areas where there's room for improvement. So for example, tackling the areas of property funds, illiquids and funder funds, where there are some limitations with the templates currently. Also providing additional guidance around areas like the timescales it should take to complete the templates and also how to calculate some of the very specific types of costs. The CTI board is actually going to meet again later this week and we'll discuss our priorities for the next year, building on the feedback and the lessons learned that we've heard about from the research. I really hope you enjoyed the PLSA and cassis webinar today, and thank you so much again for your interest in cost transparency.
So thanks for that, Pat, Mel. It's really great to get an update from Mel, and this transitions nicely into what we're seeing on the ground, working with a lot of CTI data and CTI templates that are coming into our set cassis as a utility provider of cost transparency and benchmarking services. You know, transparency is in everything that we do. It's the new normal in all facets of governance. And for cost transparency specifically, we've reached a 2-year milestone since the CTI was formed and templates published in the industry. In those 2 years, we've seen a 65% increase in the use of the CTI templates from around 10% in 2019 to now 75% of all cost data submissions in 2021. And in the last year as well, we've seen an increase in the timeliness of submissions coming into us from asset managers. And that to us is a real indicator of familiarity, engagement, and ease of data transfer between asset managers and asset owners as they start to request more and more of this cost data. So the CTI use is increasing, familiarity is increasing, and it's all heading in the right direction. There are some managers behind the pack, sort of typically overseas niche asset classes, who typically revert back to the sort of bespoke and legacy formats in submitting cost data. However, there is mapping available to map that data from the legacy formats into the CTI templates so that you have a sort of consistent like-for-like standard when collecting and reporting on your cost data across all the asset managers and asset classes that you work with as a pension scheme. So the CTI templates are ambitious. The breadth and the depth of the CTI covers around 200 data fields across all asset classes. And this is really great for more transparency for pension schemes. But that ambitiousness can also cause areas of concern around the quality of the data that's being reported. And here, vigilance is really, really needed when collecting that data and reporting that up to your boards and eventually to members. In our experience at Cassis, only 10% of data coming into us from asset managers is first time right. And that is a startling statistic that we're starting to find on the CTI templates itself, a variance in how transaction costs are being reported, ongoing charges are being reported, and even contextual data being reported on the CTI templates. And all those key elements are crucial to value for money assessment. So it's imperative that the right questions are asked and enough sort of data analysis and cleansing goes into the CTI templates before they're reported up and actions sort of made on that cost data. To be clear, costs are not a bad thing. They just need to be analyzed and viewed in the context of the scheme strategy and various mandates employed. And that's a step of a good governance process.
So Scott, some really good positive improvements here, both in the take up of the CTI templates and also the timeliness. So great to see. But as a trustee, my main concern still has to be the accuracy of this cost information so I can make the right and informed decisions on these costs. So can you actually give us some tips or some insight as to how we can achieve this improve this accuracy of the cost information received?
Yeah, that's quite right, Pat. And as I mentioned, the CTI template is very ambitious. It's got 200 data points as a sort of maximum across the full range of asset classes. And to be clear, these costs aren't necessarily new costs. They've always been there. They've just never typically been reported or reviewed in a consistent and holistic way that the CTI now provides the industry. And so that's really good progress to have those templates. But in analyzing that data and cleansing that data and making sure that the data is as accurate as possible, we've done a case study at Cassis across 265 billion worth of pension assets across DB, DC, LGPS schemes across 250 different asset managers and over 2,000 different funds. And what we're finding is that with stronger governance, and by that I mean checks, controls, a defined process, you can uncover 20 to 25% more cost data simply by asking the right questions. And that might be things on transaction costs. You've got a missing implicit costs figure on that CTI template being received from an asset manager. Query that. Why is it zero? Is it zero? Is that zero valid, or is there a number behind it? The same thing can happen on ongoing charges as well. And manual input errors can lead to the management fees being missing on that CTI report. And there are teething issues with this new sort of new template and sort of new regulatory guidance. But yeah, as I mentioned, data governance and a robust process and vigilance is key to making sure you uncover that full total cost of ownership when collecting cost data across the full range of your asset managers. And so what we're talking about on cost transparency is just what we see as a sort of governance cog that fits into that holistic, responsible investor ethos in seeking to improve trust, transparency, and ultimately protection of member pots. Key thing on cost transparency and the cost transparency initiative templates at the moment is that there are still teething issues in transferring that data from asset management systems to asset owners to get that full view of what the CTI template is looking for. As I mentioned, there's the CTI template is quite ambitious in the amount of data that it covers, and there can be mistakes in the data that is sent over. And so, what we really see as a part of good governance around cost transparency initiative templates and the data is really, querying all the relevant fields within the cost transparency initiative data to make sure that it is as accurate as possible before that data is then passed on to reporting or passed on into trustee reports. And I think that's a really important part of a sort of good governance process around cost transparency, and really balancing. The thing is, you've got to balance, reporting deadlines on one hand, and as well as that, the data quality. And it's sort of the combination of the two through a mixture of technology and sort of hands-on analysis that can help, have that a sort of concrete governance process that helps you get an accurate CTI template on time as well. So, our findings are quite stark in that if you ask the right questions, you can, get more, cost data revealed, which, it shouldn't be that way at the moment, but it currently is. And so, there's real value in asking those finer questions when you receive that data from your asset managers.